Good day and welcome everyone to a new 4 to 5 show. I think I've never had a 4 to 5 show with so many people at the same time. So this is gonna be fun. And as you know, on Wednesday we do the IT Pro edition, where on Tuesdays and Fridays we're talking about developers. And today we have a very special episode with a lot of guests. Coming from Strada, and I think it would be great for everyone just to quickly introduce them. So, like, we know who's on the stream, and then we can talk a little bit, and then we can talk about like Strada and Azure AD and how it works and show cool stuff, and be excited all the time. I'm gonna be very excited. I just had an energy drink. I see coffee over there. It's gonna be fun. So let's just start with introductions. So Michael, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Michael Wallen. I work for Strada, and I'm a technical product manager. I've been in product management for 27 years, starting my life out at Adobe, making desktop products in the Creative Cloud, and eventually falling in love with that identity space about 10 years ago.
Cool.
And sort of some of my career passions in life are really trying to discover really, really hard problems and working with a brilliant team of people to solve them.
So what made you like gain that interest into identity? Was there a specific like project or something you were working on that you were like, this is cool stuff, I want to learn more?
Yeah, that's a great question. So back when I was working at Adobe, I was responsible for the design and idea of the Creative Cloud desktop app. That thing that runs up in the corner that makes sure all your apps are up to date. And the whole idea behind that was moving from like people entering serial numbers into a screen to signing in and their software becoming sort of a living, breathing part of their lives. And so there was so much complexity involved in terms of making that bridge that it was just like the fodder for any product manager. How do you make something that could be ultimately so complex, super simple? And so building that Creative Cloud experience was what really, tipped the streams for me in terms of getting into identity.
Nice, cool. Ben?
Hey guys, Ben Robertson. I'm out of Denver, Colorado. Work at Strata, an implementations and services team. Been working in identity for quite a few years. Really love identity for the ever-evolving problems and use cases and puzzles to figure out. Love it.
Definitely. So what would you say would be like the most complex puzzle you have witnessed in, let's say, the past years around identity?
I would say moving from a session model to a stateless model in Open Identity Connect, trying to work with browsers in a way to store a token to where it can't be stolen and then use it somewhere else. So that's always changing. There's always a new browser technology. There's always a new recommendation from the IETF. So it's just kind of an ever-evolving puzzle, and that's what I love about it.
So you read into the token binding stuff that came up, and were you also disappointed by? So I know a few years ago when token binding, or actually 2 years ago or something, when we really pushed as Microsoft for token binding and making it a thing, until Google said like, we're not gonna add it to Google Chrome, where we basically started a campaign like, please Google, reconsider your thing and put it back in. What was your reaction when you heard about like Google dropping the ball on that? I mean,
it seemed like a strange move. That seemed to me to be the best way for a bearer token to be used is when you have that proof of possession. But it's tough to know why they would make a move like that.
I know, and I think it's interesting how it's nowadays still a problem that needs to be fixed / addressed. And there's not there are like the token binding things, but there's not like a generic thing around those protocols to put it in. So sorry, this is me also kind of nerding out about that type of stuff.
That's why we came here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So. That's the whole goal of the show. So thanks, Ben. So Mark.
So I'm Mark Callahan, and I'm on the marketing team here at Strada, and help tell the story about what we do in identity orchestration on a whole. By way of background, I came into identity from the single sign-on space and then spent the better part of 10 years at Twitter, leading product marketing for the developer platform at Twitter. And there were some really interesting identity situations that we ran into there via social login with Twitter and things along those lines. So it's been very much a path towards how do you tell that identity story, both to practitioners and to users themselves.
Yeah, and I think that is always a difficult thing. Like users, if I look at a user, let's say if I look at my parents, for example, they are who are not on Twitter, by the way. Maybe it's a wrong example, but but they don't care about identity, right? They just want to use the product, and having to sign in and going through the process is just an extra thing you need to go through. And it's so I think that is really difficult. And also, how did you get people to ask you, like, what is it? What is identity, and what is the thing that you do on any birthday party or anything? So it's just like, how would you explain that? How would you explain that?
It's almost sort of the mom story. How do you tell mom what you do for work?
Exactly.
Kind of
Yeah.
To a degree, it's very much around ensuring that the companies that we work with don't end up on the news.
Yeah.
I take that worst case scenario approach of what happens when identity doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And those are the organizations that have their moment in the press, an untoward moment. And it's at loss of, their customers, brand goodwill and things like that. So it's very much around ensuring that doesn't happen for companies, and making their lives easier so that they can focus on being a better company than the others. So they can focus on the really hard problems. Yep. Let someone else do the identity aspect. You focus on you.
Yeah, focus on your core business and leave the other stuff to the I want to say professionals, but yeah. That's the thing with identity, right? It's also it made me think of the story when thinking about, like, a company need to do something with identity, and when I'm a developer, I'm just gonna build something myself. And then I need to protect it, and then I need to maintain it, and then I need to update it, where you could better look into, like, what is already out there, and just don't think about identity. Like, here you have a module, here you have something, an SDK, you put it in your app and forget about the whole identity stuff. It's all fixed. So yeah, cool. Exactly. And I'm still very jealous of the snowboard behind you.
Yes. It's the best swag ever. There's a story behind that. I'll share it later. Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. So, Steve.
Hey, I'm Steve Lane. I'm a senior sales engineer here at Strata. I've been in the identity space, I think for just over 16 years at this point. Started in support. I issued into clients for the vendor I worked with at the time across North and South America, and working with the remote support teams, with development, with the customer to get them to resolution. That gave me quite a bit of experience and, frankly, empathy for organizations in their efforts to, really do identity right. And I moved into pre-sales and in about 2000, and have been there since. I just recently came over here to Strata from SailPoint.
Cool. So how did you make the move to pre-sales? What drove you there to make that step? Money? No.
It's such a good question. Actually, I actually had an article that I posted recently about that journey on LinkedIn, and it boiled down to, when I was in the support world, I had this perception that to be in sales meant to put on a facade, right? To be artificial or superficial, to just shove things down people's throats no matter what, just sell no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Sleazy, shady kind of thing. And by nature, I'm a reasonably empathetic person, I think. And I had a friend who was in pre-sales who convinced me to apply for a position there at the company I was at and just to give it a try. And what I found out very quickly is that my perceptions were very wrong. And that as long as I had to sell that actually worked, that actually brought value to customers and did what it said it was going to do, I was able to leverage that empathy that I had and I have for organizations to just help them understand, hey, does this actually work? How could it us? And let's see if we can make it work. And if not, that's okay too.
That's so cool, and I can really relate to that story, to be honest. So I'm actually coming from a pre-sales background myself as well, and exactly the thing that you're describing is like I can only sell something to someone if I know it's really going to give you that additional value and benefit, and I'm not going to sell you something because I need to sell it. And this is this goes back very, very long for me, like a long time ago. So when I was 14, I actually started to work at an electronic shop selling TVs to people. And most of those shops, they have like that special amount that you pay, and that special amount, like the less number of the amount of the price of the TV, will indicate how much money you as a seller will earn by selling this TV. And I was always the person that, even though I know, like, if I would push people to this TV, it will give me more money, I would not be able to sell it to someone if it wouldn't be the perfect fit. And that's exactly, so it's really cool to hear that like that's the passion that drives you behind it as well, like behind that sales skill. So that's very cool. Cool.
It makes all the difference, right? Because then you get to actually, instead of treating a prospect like a quote unquote like a customer, they're just a partner. They're just another entity, right? That you get to work with to solve hard problems in cool ways.
Definitely. Yeah, I always like the term trusted advisor instead of like being that is always my main goal. And this is the like, and I think you would agree on exactly the same thing. That's investing in a long-term relationship and making sure and helping out the customer out. And of course, in the end, you're selling the product, but it's not that it's not that after 3 years they're like, we bought something that we actually didn't need and now getting rid of it. That's not how it works. So that's awesome to hear.
Indeed.
Cool. So the next thing I definitely want to hear, like, what Strata, tell me about the cool stuff that you're doing, and like maybe a little overview of a little introduction, like what are your products that are there and how can they help solve the things. And then of course it would be great if we can also like show some terminals on the screen and letters floating by. That would make people very happy, I think, on the stream as well. So for the introduction part, who wanna?
I'll grab that. That's the part I can do. Yes, you let the marketer talk about that, and everyone's like, "Please don't let him show terminal. That's going to be a problem if he does that." So yes, do not worry. That's not where I am. No, the interesting way that a number of us came back to work to Strata is we'd worked with some of the founders in various organizations prior, and the company itself is founded by the team who basically ran Oracle's cloud identity and security group prior to this. And also we've got a couple of co-authors of SAML in there as well. Cool. In our founder group. But if you look at what our core product is, it's something that we're calling identity orchestration. Mm-hmm. And if you think about identity orchestration, I love, Stefan, what you just said about, like, did you sell somebody something that they're not going to use? If you think about all the vendors that people have as you're starting to build out, whether it's passwordless or authentication, authorization, as you just go down the list, a lot of those often end up as a departmental buy that somebody has said, I need this for one particular purpose, and it doesn't spread. And so you end up with these things where a well-meaning salesperson got someone to buy something, but it doesn't get integrated. And what happens, is, in a worst case scenario, like my mom's story, is you end up on the front page of the paper for a breach of some kind. And so identity orchestration, if you're just to look at it in a nutshell, is we're not replacing any of those systems, but we're making them work better and work better together by abstracting identity outside of the apps and the systems themselves into something we call the identity fabric. Mm-hmm. And then having all of the policy decisions and everything else that comes with, you talked about applications. You want to build the app and you just want the app to work. Well, when you think about migration, as people are looking to move to Azure AD or something else, oftentimes they have to rewrite all these apps. And we're like, that's a non-starter, especially when you have 20, 30, 300 apps. So identity orchestration, as you lift and decouple identity out of the apps themselves, allows the coordination of identity across all of those systems without any app rewrites, and allows you to continue the path of not just migration, but what are you going to add as you head towards a zero trust posture going forward, and you're able to do so in a way that translates that across the board. And so back to focus on your hard problems, right?
Yeah.
It's do what you do so that you can be better than your competition, instead of getting stuck in the quagmire of legacy identity. How do you manage a multi-cloud environment, on-prem and cloud? How do you make it all work together? And that's where identity orchestration comes in.
Cool. So it sounds like real magic, to be honest. What you're talking about, like you have some old apps, maybe like, let's say LDAP. You're using SiteMinder, maybe it's doing some header-based authentication. Name something else. In the past, I'm never gonna make that mistake again. On a conversation with a customer, I called Kerberos legacy. So I said, Kerberos is a legacy protocol. And then I spent 30 minutes explaining that we're not going to remove Kerberos from Active Directory anytime soon. So I try to avoid the word legacy when we're talking about those things. But no, there was really there was a learning there.
Without a doubt.
Definitely.
It's interesting though, Stefan, because just because it's legacy doesn't mean that an organization isn't going to be highly dependent on that technology or protocol or whatever it may be, and that it's not still going to be around for quite some time. And that's really part of the core of what we do, right? Is being able to not necessarily replace certain legacy technologies, some certainly, like legacy web access management platforms, but working within an environment where you have legacy web applications, highly customized web applications, sometimes web apps that the people that came to the organization 2 years ago, it's now in their lab and they don't even have the source code for it. So how do you protect those legacy web applications with modern authentication protocols, with modern things like passwordless? So to do that without requiring a rewrite of those applications, right, which can take a long time, which is expensive, that requires an abstraction layer, right, in front of those applications and services. And that's really what identity orchestration is that abstraction layer, and decouples, like Mark said, decouples the dependency of building in those mechanisms inside the applications themselves, and basically allows you to choose your own adventure of IDP, of your authentication service, of your policy management points, right? And to be able to, go ahead, sorry.
No. I'm just wondering, like, so what, when you talk, I've just named a few protocols, right, that are out there, and authentication methods that are out there. But I'm very curious, like, what maybe it's a very long list that I'm going to ask about right now, but I think also for the people looking at this and thinking about, like, I have an app somewhere that does like NTLM authentication. What is the list of protocols and stuff that you can orchestrate? So basically, very quickly move into modern authentication. Is there like a predefined list? Do you have maybe, and also, are they these connectors, or can I build my own connector? For example, if I had a developer that came up with their own authentication scheme, which is not based on any standard, or maybe like it's SAML, but it isn't. Which I can tell you, in Europe, a lot of like those digital identities, government digital identities, they actually the Dutch one. So from the as I'm in the Netherlands, but they're using SAML, but with something extra, which makes it completely incompatible with any like generic SAML thing. So I go left to right all the time. Sorry, but I hope people can still follow my story. But just wondering, like, what is the built-in list of protocols or authentication methods that you can orchestrate away, and is there an option to like basically add support for my own custom type?
It's really the gamut. I'd say anything that's kind of on the not list is like anything that uses plain text passwords. That is just insecure by default. We will certainly help you make sure you're transitioning off of that to something more secure. But people are throwing in TLM and Kerberos, and people want to move to OIDC, but they want to modernize their apps, and it's almost like all of these really great security protocols, and it's sort of like you're at the dinner table, right? And you just had a big meal, and there's the dessert tray rolling by, and there's like OIDC, JOTS, all this really great stuff, but you're on a diet, right? You just can't do it. So we want you to have your dessert and eat it too. So
yes.
Nice. I like that. Yeah.
SAML with the ice cream on top, and you're all good to go. You are in a good place. So and to answer your question, yes, custom integrations. We have customers who are actually building their own as well, from a connector perspective. So,
and if you look at okay, so I have those applications. I'm not ready to move them into a modern platform. So I'm gonna do the identity orchestration with those apps and add that modern authentication. Would that be how would you see that, and what's your experience with that? Would that be the end state, or do people see this as like a temporary thing until we replace those apps, or actually gonna build in like core modern authentication? I don't want to say this your product is only good for 3 months and then you probably but I'm just wondering, I'm really curious to learn what is the experience there, and how do your customers see that in using the product?
I'll start with that. I'll start answering. Yeah, or Ben, I'll hand it off to you for a second. So it's such a good question. When I first started interviewing with Strata, I asked that exact same question. Because I go, okay, this is really, really cool, but what would be the reason why an organization would keep it? Well, the reason is, so the short answer is, the idea is that it would be there forever. Right? Okay. Because yes, it would help an organization. Let's take an example, right? Let's say that they are now going to want to, quote unquote, modernize their web applications, specifically in the context of enforcing Azure, right? Yep. And its other authentication services in front of hundreds of legacy web applications. Well, fast forward a couple months, legitimately, and now all of those through the orchestrator, through Strata's orchestrator, you are enforcing Azure authentication. Just very, very simple scenario for all of those web applications. So now fast forward another year. What if the organization needs to adopt passwordless? Fast forward another year, and let's say, God forbid, they want to move from Azure to some other, or to Mark's earlier point, there's an acquisition. Yeah. And that organization is a different IDP. Right. So how do you then applications behind Azure? Well, it's typically, in this case now, a few lines of configuration change in a YAML file on the orchestrator. Right. So that's one example of why it is sticky in an organization, and why the organization would want and need to depend on that orchestration fabric, right, as a core part of how they deliver identity to users versus to the applications. Ben?
Cool. I like one. Sorry, Ben, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just real quick. I've run into that before with some customers I was working with. Going back to that legacy conversation, if it's legacy, does that mean it goes away? So they came up with a different word. Instead of saying legacy, they said, "No, those are heritage apps." Which I thought it reminded me of like Levi's jeans or something. But in a lot of instances, the time is not well spent reworking an app that few use. If you can use orchestration, decouple it from its old LDAP, or just local username and password, and you can bring it into compliance, why would you go back and use it? Focus on what's new and what's going to get you ahead, versus going back and trying to dig up who worked on it when and that kind of a thing. It seems like in a lot of organizations, if you can bring it into compliance, there's really no reason to go back and rework something that maybe only a handful of people use anymore.
Yeah, I see. Good point. So from a technical perspective,
Yes.
how does it work? No, so and also like I'm gonna deploy it. So what are the components and how does the architecture look of the orchestrator?
Well,
Question. So I tell you what, I mean, yeah, Michael, I tell you what, do you want to take that or do you want me to take that and go into a bit of technical dive?
Yeah, I was thinking about sort of talking about where the journey often begins when people come to us.
Because legacy was like definitely where people are starting, right? It's like how do I migrate? And Stefan, it's also multi-cloud adoption. That's like our core use cases. People continue to reach out to the cloud. How do I make it all work together? And so if you take a step back, like what's the prologue to our story? Mm-hmm. That's where I'd love to hear maybe Michael your perspective on the prologue to that.
Yeah, so it's if you don't mind, if I could share my screen.
Sure.
I got a little story to tell about this. So okay, we're gonna share that.
Michael's doing that stuff, and I want to make sure that I just really quickly directly answer the question you asked, because we'll all get into it deeper when Ben and I start to show the technology itself. But the platform itself is basically, it's just a binary that you run as a service on a Linux box. So as long as you're running the version of a Linux OS that has systemctl, it simply just runs as a service on that system. Nothing is persisted. It's a single service with really a single configuration file.
Could I run it in a cloud setup? So as a
right.
Yeah. Okay. And would that service be? Do I need to deploy multiple instances of it? Maybe for high availability, scalability. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely for both, for sure. The thing about it, because it is a service, because the configuration is completely through a single YAML file. That means that it's extremely straightforward. I'll never say easy, but very straightforward to make it part of your CI/CD pipeline, right? Just treat it as something else, as a service that is part of your infrastructure as code.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Michael, did you, it seems like you stopped sharing your screen.
Yeah, I just wanted to let y'all finish that.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks.
Piece of the conversation here. So
I wanted to check if there was a technical issue, so that's why I was asking. No. Cool. Okay, so
okay, whoops.
Yep, Infinity.
There we go.
So let's make it bigger.
Okay, so this is kind of, so I'm going to sort of think about the role as how our customers typically kind of come to us. I'm going to play the role of our customer. So the scenario is we're Sonar Systems, and we're a megacorp, and we've got this app that nobody in the building has touched in 15 years. But this app, this heritage app, if you will, it contains all of the crown jewels of like where all of our revenue comes from, all the super secret stuff. And we have a big initiative to modernize this application, and it always starts with security and identity and authorization. So as you can see here, when I log into this app, I'm using simple username and password, right? That's a gotcha right there. Passwords are dead, and they're going to be dead. And in fact, I can log in with no, multi-factor authentication.
Yeah. So and you're even going over HTTP, but I'm just
exactly
claim passwords over HTTP.
What's wrong with that?
Seriously, this is where sometimes this is kind of where it begins.
Yeah.
And this app, as you can see, it hasn't really been touched in a while. Certainly it's not responsive or anything fancy. But we want to start with how do I protect this application, making sure that we have more modern standards for authentication, and also the right people can access this app. This app is only accessible by certain executives of the company. And the things that's sitting behind this app is the stuff that I manage as a customer. And in this particular case, SiteMinder is sitting behind it. And my job now is to try, without really having access to the original applications team, to find out what's in this application. How is it being used? What are all the things that it needs in order to run? And begin, using Microsoft Azure for authentication. I want to migrate those users who are using it. And I also want to add multi-factor authentication. So all of that stuff is sitting somewhere in this user interface. And this user interface also is not the greatest experience, if you will. It's sort of not optimized. It's more about optimized for managing all of the things that are related to the system, for agents and proxying and rules and specifying headers.
Yep.
And so some of the
That's
things
the kindest
that,
way I've ever heard anybody describe that.
I should also say what very typical is I am the only person in our 10,000 person company who has access to this and actually knows where stuff is, let alone anybody else.
Yeah.
And so now
you're giving the audience PTSD, by the way, Michael. Everyone's like realizing this.
There's
someone goes, this looks like early 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. I think on the one thing I was thinking of, but this was actually because this afternoon I installed a demo server and I tried to download something from the Azure portal, but on that server there was only Internet Explorer. And that isn't supported anymore by the Azure portal. Yeah, just not kidding. And I was like, the only cool thing about this will probably still run like very okay in Internet Explorer because it's that old. But yeah, okay.
So some of the things that also make this challenging is that, some of these, I'd say workhorse identity and authorization platforms like this are also going out of service. So if I wanted to, call somebody and say, hey, how do I do? There's not a lot of great support out there. So and this is the first part of the journey, finding out what do I have? How does the app work? How is it authorized? And so this is a part that we decided to provide some automation into. And so this first part of discovery is taking a look at interrogating this environment and finding out what I have. Yeah. And so we built a tool that goes out and does that. So it's a tool you can download from our website. It's called Mavericks Identity Discovery. And you run a couple of commands basically to connect it to your SiteMinder environment. And it's just a read-only operation where it says, okay, where is my SiteMinder environment? You enter your password, and then you run a command called extract. And using the SiteMinder API, it goes and extracts all of that data that's hidden in all these different directories. And I could also load up all of my access logs. So once I understand all of the realms or apps, if you will, that's in there, I also want to know what's in those realms. Are people using them? Is there any traffic to those realms? Yeah. So we take and stitch together all of that configuration information with usage so that you can understand, hey, I've got a list of apps that are highly used. Maybe I want to protect those first. And then I have some apps that have zero traffic. Maybe I can decommission those things while I'm going through this discovery process.
So sorry, that is very useful information if you go into a migration, right? Because that's basically the first step if you look at any migration is what do I have and how important is it? And then probably also one thing that could be interesting to know is how complicated is it? Because it could be in a very important app, but it could be very complicated. And I think you as part of this migration want to show some success to the organization and enable users. So you probably want to have that quick win as well, which has that impact, but isn't that hard to move. I had one other question about the discovery tool. So you're now connecting it to SiteMinder. Are there any other legacy systems that this can connect to and extract data from, or is this just for SiteMinder?
Yeah, right now it's just for SiteMinder, and we're working on supporting, Oracle Access Manager, Ping, and basically any type of system that we want to kind of interrogate and provide this kind of reporting interface. So when I have finished all of that analysis and extraction, we provide this visual experience so that people moving from in that SiteMinder world can know exactly what they have. So in this particular case, we took all that configuration information and we began scoring it in terms of the complexity that it would take to migrate with Mavericks. Meaning, instead of rewriting these applications, you have 18 apps that are being managed by SiteMinder that you could simply migrate to or modernize the identity with simple configuration files. And we'll show you how to do that in some of the other demos that we're going to share later. You've got 7 that maybe have more headers, so there's a little bit more configuration. And then you have 5 that have some regex or some redirects that can be managed using our extensibility layer called service extensions. And so this provides a very high level insight of what it takes to migrate these using Mavericks, but also it tells you what's in use, right? So these traffic counts here are telling me that I have one really highly used domain, and it's not even within my top 10 here. And this is all my traffic information. It's telling me that agent information. It's telling me also, how much traffic it's getting, what kind of rules are in place that I may need to consider, and kind of getting me back to that Sonar application here. It's telling me I could dig in a little bit deeper. I can see all of the policies that'd be in place, basically the authorization rules that I would need to configure Mavericks, all the locations that need to be protected. And it's also telling me all of the headers or responses that application needs in order to function. In this particular case, Sonar is pulling from this LDAP directory and needs employee ID and employee name information in order to continue the authorization. And so from here, I now better armed to maybe go talk to that application team and say, hey, I want to be able to modernize this application. Our plan is we're going to proxy this using Mavericks, and here are the headers that I'm going to send you. Or I can start kind of at the high level summary view, generate a report and say, hey, let's talk to the CISO and to talk to the CTO about what we have in our environment, how we may go about creating a plan in order to modernize these applications without having to rewrite them.
And the data that's behind the portal, ooh, that's a cool effect.
Oops,
Yeah.
the data that's behind the portal, can I just also get it as CSV, JSON type of format, or that I can basically import it into maybe an Excel sheet that I'm working on, or a tool, or whatever.
Yeah, so the data that I built the visual report off, it's all combined together in one JSON file. And cool. You can go in there and we've taken what is a very complex structure of all these configurations and to simplify it in order to sort of render this visual experience.
That's cool. I really like the dark mode, by the way. I put everything in dark mode. So I saw you flip the switch and putting it up. But
I always run dark mode.
It matches your colors that you have for the Twitch stream, the purple and the darks and everything like that.
Yeah, no, that's very nice. So basically,
we built that just for you, Steph.
Yeah, oh, thank you so much. I feel so honored. I just quickly want to say hi to a few folks in the chat. So Bold.io, thanks for watching. And yeah, all good here. And then Full Snable, also hi. And I saw someone, TRP8472. You know what the worst thing is with all those names? Actually, most of those people have told me their real name 10 times. And it's not that I'm it's not that I'm not interested. It's just that I have such a hard time remembering everyone's name. So what I really love about how this is set up is that everyone's name is on the screen. So
we were going to come in with usernames and really mess with you. That was
yeah. You should have done that. That would it be fun? Or all put in the same name or something, and then it's cool. So that's a little sidestep here. But so basically, if I'm looking after I have that SiteMinder implementation, I want to modernize it. The first thing I probably want to do is run the tool, right? Mm-hmm. And so I did put on the link to get the tool on the screen. So that's the identity discovery tool, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And
Okay.
cool part was it only took like a couple of minutes to do. Like, right. So this is something that would take days, of work in any other world, and it just takes you a few minutes. And it's available for free. It runs locally. There's no phone home functionality to it. So yes, definitely something to go play with right now and figure out how you could then take that information and go into a migration event. And how do we get to Azure AD from SiteMinder?
I'm pretty sure now people are going to download it and really look into the traffic it's sending if it's actually not
That's true.
really phoning on. But no, that's cool. And by the way, about talking about names, in this view, everyone's name is gone. So thank you, guy in red with black shirt. Sorry,
I thought you were going to go down the path of hair, because that one's going to get really personal really fast. And you're going to be like,
generic-looking bald white guy.
Bald guy number 2.
Oh. Me or him.
Yeah.
I do think we do need to work a little bit on the diversity on the next show now to compensate, but that's
fully
sorry
agree
about that.
100%.
But yeah, so you run the tool, and then okay, it's cool. Then I figured out like this is an app that is being used a lot, and I can easily like migrate it. Could we Koala Robot? Thanks. From now on, I'm going to call you Koala Robot. So Koala Robot. After that discovery, I'm very curious to learn like how can we get that app connected and get it to work with Azure AD, and then. Because that's going to be cool, right? I have an app that doesn't know anything about identity protection, that doesn't know anything about MFA, and all that type of stuff. I don't want to make this a sales pitch, by the way, but I am really passionate about this type of stuff. And now I can just easily like move that app there. So Koala Robot.
Yeah.
or Michael.
I'm glad you asked. I think that my friends Ben and Steve can start talking about the rest of the story, and they'll be able to show you wonderful things like YAML and some more terminal for all of the exciting terminal and YAML stuff. So, do you guys want to sort of show your wares?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. All right, I'll start sharing here. I'll show you guys a couple things, and then we'll move over to Ben. Okay, so let me get this little dog out of my way. So how does this actually work? Right, so I mentioned before. You guys see that okay?
Yes, you can.
So how does it actually work? Right, so this is a super generic architecture. Is going to get actually technical here in a sec. Cool. Like I mentioned, right, the orchestrator itself runs as a service on a Linux box. And yeah, in real life production, you're going to have more than one of these things, right? Both for high availability and for scale. But effectively, it acts as what you configure it to be and to do. So it sits between, in this case, the user in the browser and web applications, right? Yeah. So you can run it in a lot of different modes. So being an orchestrator, right, it can do a lot of different stuff. The key things to remember going into these next technical slides and what I'm about to show everyone is a couple things. One, that literally everything is done at runtime. Second, nothing is persisted in storage. There's no backend database, there's no directory, nothing like that. So what is persisted in memory only. All right. So let's take an example, right? Let's say that you have a web application. You've run our discovery, or let's say a web application. Let's say you have hundreds of web applications. You run our discovery tool. You've prioritized some of them to sit in front of or behind Azure, specifically as acting as an IDP. Right. So what's the dependency on that? Obviously, you actually have to have an Azure AD account object, right, to authenticate with to do that.
Yeah.
So one of the modes one of the use cases that you can use Strata Mavericks for, and by the way, Mavericks being the specific name of this software platform, for is something that we call user migration or identity migration.
Steve, I think your screen share may have frozen.
Yeah.
You want to try? Can you guys see that?
Yeah, it's like part of your screen are updating.
Yeah, fractal.
That's too bad. Okay, let me stop sharing. What I'm going to do, I can see that my connection isn't great. So I'm going to, real quick here, just to see if this will help with the bandwidth, I'm going to reduce my video resolution to blurry, which I don't think anybody would be upset about that. So
you look very legacy right now.
That's it.
Heritage.
Cool. Okay, let's try it. There you go.
Yeah, we'll
all right.
Okay. And
better?
There's your screen.
Right.
Yeah, now we see the full slide.
Maybe. Cool. Hey, all right, excellent. So we have a lot of what we call different recipes. There are the use cases. We have things available in the platform to make configuring those use cases pretty straight, right? And so the ones that we'll go over are identity migration or user migration and app migration, right? So let's actually get into the demo.
We're back at the same.
Hey, Steve, it's pixeling again.
Yeah.
Oh, guys.
Steve, maybe you want to cut the video for.
I was going to say, if you cut your video, there'll only be 2 bald guys then. And that makes,
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I just cut the video. I'm really hoping this will do better.
May need to come back in.
Yeah, let's try resharing.
Stop sharing.
Ooh, now we're all
one
bigger
more time
on the
here.
screen.
Yes. More real estate.
Yeah. I do like to play around with those different modes like this. It's so, and this is not personal. Like I can move you over there.
I love it.
I'm big.
Yeah.
I can only imagine regular meetings with you. That's got to be.
So saying that, what I used to do during meetings, and I figured out that Snapchat has a virtual webcam driver where you can use all Snapchat filters as a virtual webcam. So I would just put on a Snapchat filter, making myself look like a talking, what was it? I don't know, something strange, and then just enter the meeting. Yeah, a koala robot. And then just enter the meeting like that. And everyone was like, what did you do? What is that a new Teams feature? Or so that was fun. And now basically, I just removed everything again. It was just fun to try it. So yeah, it's those are actually the things I do during meetings, or annoying backgrounds,
Yes,
especially
absolutely.
during team meetings. I love to put up the logos of our competitors behind me and see who pays attention during the meeting. That's always fun to do. That's only internal team meetings. I never did that. And then you always need to remember to put it off before you go into that customer meeting. Right?
That's right.
Cool. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll see if this works any better. I really hope it does. Okay. So assuming you guys can see this, and again, if it gets bad, just let me know, and we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
So the precursor, right, to migrating an application, we talk about migrating an app, right? What are we really just talking about? Not migrating that app from on-prem to the cloud. You could, but that's not really here nor there in terms of what we do or what we need to care about. We're talking about migrating the IDPs, the authentication services, and so on that are used to protect those applications. So obviously a precursor to that is that if we're going to shift to Azure as an IDP for these applications, you have to have Azure AD accounts.
Yep.
You can use the orchestrator to automatically create those accounts just in time by virtue of the fact that a user successfully authenticates to that web application, for example, through a legacy access management platform like CA, Oracle, IBM, and so on. So, of course, you don't have to do it this way, right? There are provisioning tools, there's scripts that you can use to do this. So, just to hammer home the point,
Azure AD Connect is probably the first core tool you want to install and get those users up in Azure AD to also get those other benefits.
Absolutely.
But I like the fact that you basically can do a inline migration. So just like the next time you're gonna we've added this. The next time you're gonna use that app, we actually migrate you silently to that cloud service, and you as an end user don't know about it. But you're now in a more modern place there. Cool.
Exactly. And the account created are the accounts of the users that are actually using those web applications, right? That's typically the key advantage of doing it this way, is that you're doing a utilization-based migration of those users. So if you have 50,000 account objects in that application, but only a fraction of those users are actually using that app, right? You don't necessarily want to just go create accounts and access for those people in the IDP. Right? So let's actually run through it here.
Okay. So is that creation the creation part, can that basically be any type of API call that you could do during the process? Like if maybe okay, yeah. So because I can think, for example, like I have a tool, a database that I will keep track of who's migrated, or I could imagine like signing in. Maybe your account doesn't get created in Azure AD because it's already there, but it does like mention that tick, this account is migrated, so you can see how many people like are now switching to the new platform. That could be
absolutely interesting. So maybe instead of create an account, add a row to a database, or change a field in a database that says, yes, cool. This user is migrated. Nice. 100%, no problem.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, so
and step one, you may have to do,
right, we're getting a resource.
Because I think your screen's going to get a little fractal again on us.
I'm going to have to do pantomime?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Oh my gosh. Okay. Can you see Azure AD right now on your screen?
Partly.
A portion of it.
Part of it.
A portion of it.
The upper left-hand corner is doing great.
Oh my God. Well, let's see what we can get done here with what we have. Ben, it may be better to switch over to you in a minute if this gets worse. So we need to, on demand, right, create that Azure AD account, because eventually we're going to shift the authentication service for those applications to Azure AD. So what am I going to do? As the end user, I'm not going to do anything different than I've ever done in the past. So what do I have?
Steve, it's unfortunately totally not playing well. And both, you're right. The demo gods are not cooperating at the moment for the screen.
I tell you what, let me do this. Why don't you guys keep talking? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to hardwire to my network and see if that makes a difference. I can see in the stream here that I only have 2 bars. So I'm going to see if I can resolve that. And I'll be back in a few minutes, okay?
Stefan, you'd mentioned the idea of like those best user experiences is where the user doesn't know something's changed. It's when our job's invisible, you did it right. And somebody the CEO isn't calling saying, I can't get to my app in the way I expected to get to it. Mm-hmm. And where that comes up a lot is, as you're thinking about how do you add new modern authentication to things, as earlier, you and I talked briefly about passwordless and that sort of scenario, and Ben, you mentioned as you're adding things, what makes us, folks stay with us, and why would you change those things? Well, people are moving away from legacy two-factor authentication because of the problems it had, and moving to modern auth, whether it's YubiKey or a Hyper, OneCosmos, but they don't want to interrupt the experience. And so I know I'm doing kind of a setup here, but while we're waiting for Steve to come back in, that's another thing that identity orchestration can help you do, is it just happens in line with from the user's perspective.
Yeah, and also if you look at from like, I think also the end user perspective and fool's navel, like CEO, who worries about that guy, right? When you are on first name basis with the CTO, you should be worried. That's definitely true.
Touche. That is right.
If the CEO put you on speed dial, then there's probably something wrong, and you should do things maybe a little bit differently. But what I think, especially with this, is that a lot of companies are moving to cloud services, right? And as a Microsoft person, I'm just going to take Office 365 as an example, but it could be anything, right? And with Office 365, you're using Azure AD. So those users that are using Office 365 on a daily basis are already completely known with that signing process, or actually even better, don't even know there is a signing process because they have single sign-on coming from a Windows 10 machine, just doing Windows Hello. And I think then the cool thing is that you have that old app and connecting it using Mavericks to Azure AD. So basically making that modern authentication. As an end user, I can now go from my Office 365 launcher directly into that old legacy application without actually needed to remember that username and password, signing in, all that cool stuff. So it's even, I think in this case, it's actually next to keeping it the same experience or no change. It's actually going to give them even a better experience, because now you don't need to remember that username and password for that cool Sonar app that you showed. Actually, it made me think of another Sonar app which has an extra R at the end, but that's not a very legit tool. It's actually used to find TV shows on the internet. But let's skip that for now. But and I, by the way, I just see that Rockstar74 rated the channel. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today we're talking with Strada around the identity orchestrator, and also around how can you modernize classic app and put in modern authentication.
Yes.
With that as well. Yeah. Cool. So
Ben, I was going to say show and tell. Remember, you don't want the marketing person doing any kind of command line show and tell here. So, yes.
I see Steve is back as well. Let's just enabling his audio, so he should be able to hear us. Let's see if he can.
Hey guys.
And by the way, Michael, your wheels are popular. Your mic in the background is very popular, by the way, with the audience.
Nice.
That's my primary mode of transportation.
Cool.
Let's see.
Okay,
Steve,
well, guys, I'm going to give this a try one more time. Unfortunately, I don't think it's my internet connection. I'm a bit worried it's our VPN. I have to be authenticated to our VPN to do this. We typically don't have issues, but I'm a bit worried that that's what's going on. So we'll see. We'll give this a try.
Okay.
If not, Ben, I think you're going to get to be the one to step up, buddy.
I think after the show we should probably talk about now I forgot zero trust networking. So to get rid of that VPN for the next time. So happy to help you there.
You know people, yes.
Fantastic.
Okay, let's.
Okay, guys, let's give this a try.
Hey,
Better.
Looks better.
Way
Way better.
Way
All
better.
right, keep your fingers crossed. All right,
Yes.
here we go. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We're going to migrate that user. So right now, the orchestrator is sitting in front of the web application and in front of the legacy access management platform. In this case, in the demo environment, we've got that legacy app called Sonar with CA SiteMinder sitting in front of it. And the orchestrator, the Maverick orchestrator, is sitting in front of that. It's effectively acting as a reverse proxy, but in this config, it's not really a reverse proxy because it's not enforcing any policy at all. It's just simply terminating SSL, inspecting all of that HTTP traffic. So as an end user,
Sorry to interrupt, but what I get from your story, basically, you can run it in two different modes. Then is that how I understand it? Like you can do reverse proxy and maybe have some extra functionality, or run it like more as a converter, not being the reverse proxy functionality. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct, right? With an important nuance. The nuance being that I would fairly characterize it as saying it in types of configurations, right? So this is the configuration that we use to help organizations migrate, right? Services that they're using, providers and so on. So just to show that we're doing all this is our Azure AD tenant, I'm going to authenticate into this application as an end user, Sam Tate, right? So just to show he does not yet have an Azure AD account object. So I, as an end user, when I log into my web app, my experience isn't going to be different at all, right? Because really there's nothing changed about that experience. I log in, I authenticate to my app. In this case, this app, right? So here's our app that we developed in 1999, right? In this case, SiteMinder is doing its thing. It's header-based, right? It's shoving a few different headers into that app to establish user context. So what's actually happening, right? So one of the things that we have the configuration set traders detect the fact that the authentication was successful, and that is the trigger in this case to do a thing. A thing in this case is to create an Azure AD account. to your earlier point, that thing could be basically anything that you can do with our connectors or a connector that you yourself configure and develop. So what are we doing? In this case, we're creating an Azure AD account, right, as the end goal. But the first thing for us, just to show off some of the fancy features, we're treating that AD account with attributes at runtime. Right now, as I'm yapping at you guys, got pulled from the session token, got pulled from an LDAP server, got pulled from data sitting in a database. That could also be pulling data, attribute data from a REST service. Right? So anything that you can connect to with the orchestrator, you can choose to use in this case to fetch that data and then use that, in this case, those attribute values to populate the account object on the Azure side. Right? So while we wait for that to happen, one of the questions is, okay, let's say that all works. It's super cool. One of the keys to this is how hard or easy is that?
Yeah.
Right. So you're looking at here is quite literally the YAML configuration file that this specific orchestrator is using right now. Right. So we are identifying our attribute providers, and then we define the operation for create. And it's simply parameterized. Hey, whatever we got from either the token or the LDAP server dot the attribute value name, that's what we're going to shove into the display name for that Azure AD account in this case, right? And down the line, right, to employee database and so on. So it's
cool,
really slick, right? Because I as an end user, obviously I didn't any of that happen. And we took data that disparate, right, identity data that's fragmented across multiple systems to ultimately do this here, right, and create this Azure AD account object. So I'm going to move on from this one, right, because I know it's cool, it's interesting, but to your point, things like Azure AD Connect are perfectly viable solutions to effectively do the same thing, right, to get to the same end state. I need an account object with some
world, right? Yes.
In a Microsoft, exactly. All right, so now what am I going to do? I'm going to just show this to you guys. So I'm going to change the configuration of this orchestrator to go from a user migration to being an application migration configuration. Cool. So what did I do there? I simply ran an alias script, basically just copies another copy of that YAML file into the primary, or rather overwrites the primary and just bounces the orchestrator. So now the orchestrator is operating in a totally different mode. In this mode, this is app migration mode. So now in this mode, there is no legacy apps management platform inline, right? So SiteMinder, ISAM, they're out of the picture, they're gone, right? So now, I hit request for a resource. Right? In this case, the configure is set to say, hey, if you want to access the resource, in this case, any resource under root in the Sonar application, you have to be authenticated to Azure. And if you're not authenticated to Azure, then we're going to redirect you to authenticate with Azure. So let's do that. Now, this is the same instance, same session, right? Because everything is done at runtime. I can hit enter right now to access the same page. Mavericks detects the resource that I'm looking to access. Policies defined, user has to authenticate with Azure. Cool. We direct that user to authenticate with their Azure creds. Right? And so I authenticate with my Azure creds. In this case, that was created by Mavericks. And now I'm in my web application.
Cool.
Right? And
so basically for the end user, the only thing that changes is how the sign-in screen looks then, right? It's now the Azure AD screen instead of the Sonar interface. Steve?
Could use, for example, they already, if you as an organization have a landing page that's hosted on a web reverse proxy, it is a web reverse proxy. You can host so choose and actually authenticate against whatever IDP you want, but not necessarily redirect them right to that. So it's up to you. Just depends on what you want, want that user experience to be.
Right.
So let me show you a couple other things here real quick. Now I'm going to go to Ben very, very briefly. check this out, right? So notice the user context here. It's a little bit different, right? Before it just said Samuel Tate. Now it says Samuel Tate analyst. Well, why is that? Well, it's because we're choosing to show off a couple interesting things here in the demo, right? So this is literally the configuration that it's in right now. This is the live configuration file, right? So I define my resource and the redirects and all that basic stuff, but hey, the headers. So what am I going to pass to that particular application? Well, in this case, we're getting this, pulling this directly from the SAML token or the OIDC token. We're getting the first name directly from making a Graph API. We're getting the last name, doing the same thing, and then also concatenating it with that user's job title that sits in a database, doing that all at runtime. So check this out, right? If I go and change this configuration right now, and let's say, Stefan, I'm just going to be silly and cheeky here.
Almost right. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't want to steal too much time, but there's actually a funny story around this. So the reason my name is spelled with an F is because my parents wanted to choose the version that everyone would always write correctly, and it actually turned out that nobody writes my name with an F. It's always PH or a V or so. Yeah, it's.
Feel your pain, buddy. So we got to talk about this offline at some point. So my name is Stephen, Stepan. So if you look at how it's spelled, that's the German spelling of it, which is Stefan.
Yep.
But no, it's actually pronounced Stephen. So that always made things interesting.
And the funny thing is,
so I changed
so my name is it's spelled the same in German, but in Dutch it sounds different. So it's Stefan. So it's I when I'm in the US, I always call myself Steve to just avoid any I'm like just Steve, put that on a cup when I'm at Starbucks or anything. It's
Totally.
Cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Buddy.
So
all right. So last thing, all I'm going to do, I'm just going to simply restructure. I changed the configuration. Very simple, cheeky configuration change, right? But I just restart the orchestrator. It loads that YAML. And now, as an end user, right, I'm going to refresh the screen here. And as soon as I get past this, because I chose no before, now the header that we're passing in is
there you go. Cool.
Right? So it's incredibly powerful, right? The last thing I'll show here before I pass it over to, because I want Ben to show you guys, I showed something relatively simple, right? Going from legacy web access management platform, getting it out of the way, enforcing Azure IDP or Azure Authentication for those web applications, and simply just passing header data to the app just like it expected before. But in this case, doing something more advanced or useful at runtime, just reaching out to various sources to establish that context, rather than having to do like a virtual directory or having to create a centralized place where all this stuff is kept in sync. Right. So the last thing I'll show you here is that you can choose to also define policy within the orchestrator, right? That is more fine-grained. Right? So when I say choose, again, this is a choose your own adventure thing. If you're using something like Plain or Axiomatics, where you have a lot of these policies already defined, no problem, right? We can just shout at runtime to those services to get a policy decision and enforce that. But in this case, just showing a very brief example, again, of how simple policy definition can be in this context is, let's say the resource here for cost centers. That's this little button here.
Yep.
I will allow you in if you're authenticated with Azure, and if your department value we pull from the database is finance, and if your Azure AD record, the country value is either US or Canada. If all three of those things are true, right, then we will authorize you. And if not, like this guy isn't, when I click on that resource, it's an auto. And again, that's just
nice.
Straight up there at runtime.
Cool. I
so it's
do
cool
feel
stuff.
a little bit like excluded now when it's only US and Canada, but no, it's really cool.
I'll put Dr.
No, it's
just for you.
No, and no, but this is really cool, because especially also that in-app stuff, which I know, like SiteMinder is there's a thing there as well, right, where you can specify specific URLs and put on policies on that.
Sure.
And yeah. So one thing I'm just thinking of is like, so I got this app, I found it in my discovery, and it's probably also it's getting also like, does it also get the authorization data from SiteMinder, and could I use that like almost like copy pasted into this YAML template instead of like figuring out all the URLs that I need to protect and with what type of conditions?
You're talking about secret unreleased features that we planned on building but would not have released yet. But
Nice.
that, like, we want to make this like even more push button. We have all of this data. We understand the configuration. And so we've seen some of our customers take that data that they've extracted themselves and automate the creation of those YAML files, based on simple scripting. So it's definitely the world of the possible, and where we're hoping to take to simplify this orchestration.
Cool, great. So then, Ben, I think you're like the next in line for the
That's
demo
right.
stuff, right?
Our drummer in the band. Yes,
Exactly.
I showed the easy stuff, right? What about a scenario where to go from one hard token type to another?
Ooh.
And I think that's one of the things that Ben could show you guys.
Yeah, this one hits near and dear to my heart because I'm sure lots of you guys have been there. You've changed or done a scary big bang type cutover, and despite everything seeming to go well, you get a call from the user. Hopefully not your help desk for the CEO. I know I've been there. Probably most of you have been there too. No one likes to get that phone call. But even when it goes well, I think to myself, I made this better. I modernized it. But now I'm still getting complaints that this changed, right? So it's frustrating, like to go to improve something, but users don't sometimes understand or know where you're coming from. So what I want to show is kind of, Stefan, you made a name for it today, an inline cutover or a just-in-time cutover here. So I'll share screen and show you. What I'm going to be showing you is moving from a legacy type two-factor, like an RSA keychain or something. I know a user in the chat said all old technology was once the new cool thing. So we're going to use a RSA keychain, which probably was very cool at one point in time, and move to something a little bit more modern, like a FIDO or YubiKey. In my case, I'm going to use a YubiKey. You could do passwordless. A lot of things could fit here. A lot of Microsoft MFA. Really anything you want to use for your organization. So let me pull up here a web page, and we're going to go back to that same. Yep, just for the theme here today, and also to make sure that I'm on the right profile, right? So
I actually didn't know you could do that. Change the background color of the browser profile. So that's cool. I need to implement that as well.
Yeah, it's the demo profile.
Nice.
So we're going to go to back to our standard less cool sonar app than the other sonar that was mentioned today. But what I'm going to do is just hit that. I'm going to hit that link for the URL for the app, and we're going to see Microsoft Azure Authentication, similarly to the other demos here. So this app could be, with an orchestrator, you could designate, as Steve's already shown, any IDP that you want. Here we'll use the best one.
Exactly. That is perfect wording.
Your check's in the mail, Ben.
Yeah. Very good. I'll put it in the chat then, my address here, PayPal.
Bitcoin.
So I've gone through here, and now it's going to ask me for that legacy RSA key. So this would be what a user is used to seeing. There's nothing new or unusual there for them. They're going to put in that code from their keychain, and away they go. The next step here, we are actually migrating a user into a YubiKey or another two-factor. So this could say anything you want. What I would recommend is explaining to the user, like, please don't throw away your old key. You may need it for another system. We're about to register you for a new key. It's new and better. Those kinds of things that a small screen for the user to know like what's actually happening now, and kind of walk them through it as simple as possible. So I register that key, and now it wants me to touch it on my laptop. So I'll touch the key there.
I always used to make when I would do the demo with the key and you need to touch it. During my presentation, I did a lot of passwordless presentations, and I always made the joke like, okay, so now you can imagine a key. It's in your backpack all day, and at some point it's just feeling lonely, and it just wants to be touched at some point. And this is why you need to touch it. Yeah.
Can I steal that?
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah. Exactly.
Last time I tried to yank my webcam and show it, and I almost pulled the monitor down. So I'm going to not do that this time. I promise I touched the key. You have to take the word for it.
I believe you.
So one more touch, because it takes 2 to register it. So there's 2.
Right. I know. This is a very needy key.
And for what it's worth, your pop-ups weren't showing. So if you're visually trying to follow along, the pop-ups there were just very quick and easy UB registration.
Yep, it must have only shown the back screen, but similar to what you've seen in any kind of touch or Windows Hello, it's a pop-up that says, "Hey, touch the key, and do you allow the browser to use this key?" So, touched it. We're in, and now let's show one more thing. I'll log out of the app for this demo, and then it'll redirect right back in. But here we are, and I've got. Let me show you too. Get a quick share into full screen.
There you are.
Now, hopefully, you can see that.
No,
so I came right back into that application, and already it's asking me for the YubiKey this time. So it knows that I've been here before. I've hit this application. I'm no longer an RSA or legacy 2FA user. I'm now a FIDO or YubiKey or passwordless user.
Nice.
And that YubiKey is no longer lonely. You're reaching out to touch.
Exactly. Didn't like that. There we go.
4 times 0.
It says don't talk so much during demos. You're going to turn out a 10-second FIDO key touch.
Nice. Oh. And he's gone.
Oh no, the punchline!
He's and that wraps up our session for this week.
Today, yes.
I guess his browser closed, right? Where also the restream stuff is in. I think so, but
that's hilarious.
I do think we already got the best part of the demo, right? Because I can imagine this also being like an enabler. If you're as a company also moving towards like that new type of key, this could be an enabler for people to. And there, Ben is back. There you go. Yeah, we were like, let's wrap it up. That's it. We showed the best stuff, and there you go.
Everyone leave before
it just closes up there.
All right, cool. So no,
what I was,
Stephen, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to validate what you said. You're right. It is an accelerator. Right, to actually being able to fully and completely adopt things like passwordless tech.
That's right. And we didn't do any app rewrites, right? There's nothing that was permanently changed on Sonar. That's the key to all of this with orchestration, is that it's, decoupled the identity from the app itself, so that you aren't making permanent one and done changes to an app, nor do you need access to it. In fact, you don't even need access to the app itself, and you can have multiple MFA solutions if you so desire as well. So it allows for sort of hybrid coexistence also.
That's really cool. Cool. It's really cool demos and actually like seeing how it works. And I think it's very cool how we just like, it has been an hour and 20 minutes, but we've been talking a lot about different stuff. I think the app migration itself was the shortest piece of the whole show, right? It was
absolutely.
By design.
Yeah. We could have maybe done 10 in this time, yeah.
So one of our publicly referenceable customers is Kroger, a very large grocery chain here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And the way that, at this point, they're not even using our services they're just doing this all themselves. But in the beginning, when we were helping them for those low effort or those low complexity applications, was typically about a day to two before they were using this discovery tool just to get all the information necessary to know what to actually pass to that application, all that kind of stuff. Once it's quite literally under an hour for a production deployment to have Maverick sitting in front of and protecting and enforcing modern auth for a web app. So for those low effort, for those low complexity applications, I should say, legitimately, right, aside the requirements gathering time, you're looking at an hour or two. And for the worst case, the highest complexity where you are going to be doing things like writing service extensions, so far we've found that to be at most a week. For now.
Cool.
Yeah, if you compare that to like what it would take to ramp up a team, dig up the code base, like your best case scenario in a low complexity, we've estimated that's 4 to 5 weeks per low complexity app just to do that alone. And so that's where it's kind of a daunting task. Imagine being in that stressful scenario and it's like, you've got a day to secure this app or we have to shut it down until further notice. And so that kind of sort of savings allows teams to grow and expand and, get the job done.
That's very cool. Awesome. I think like anything else you think is important that we need to add? I think we showed that the magic is real. Like let's make a bridge back to the beginning where Mark, when you started talking about everything and it sounded like magic, but it is really something that happens, like you explained, like orchestrating everything together, connecting it, and doing it easy and quick. I don't want to make this again a sales pitch, but this is what I really think.
Free stuff. We'd love give the discovery tool a try. That's as we have it, and also had a chance. We did an interview with a number of identity admins, like our audience, and we actually found some really interesting survey results that we put together in just a little report. So we have both of those available. Everyone loves free stuff, hopefully, not salesy, just hopefully that makes everyone's lives more interesting and you learn something today. So
definitely. I will put the link in the chat as well. So it's going to be a comment underneath this video when you're doing the rewatch, because you can rewatch it as well on YouTube. Will be available after the show, right after. If you missed a part of it, you definitely want to rewatch it. It's so much fun. And it really a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining and being here today. What I said, I had a lot of fun. I hope that people who watched as well. And the last thing we need to do is rate a channel, and then we're going to close down the stream. So I figured out Code Rushed only has 2 viewers. So let's just start a rate and let everyone enjoy what Code Rushed is doing at this point. And
love it.
I just push the button, then it will take 10. These are the most awkward 10 seconds of the show. It's waiting until the rate starts. But there you go. I can upload this right now. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for being on the show. And talk soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.